A year and a half ago, I got into property management. The most eye opening thing about working in these apartments is when you see just how disgusting the average person is. I would meet people when they show up for a tour and they seem totally normal. We were joking around, connecting. Then they move in, and then I go into their unit a month or two later once they've settled in, and they just live in a complete rat's nest. I went into one unit for a plumbing inspection, and as soon as I walked in, I just got hit with a putrid, sour smell. Pretty quickly, I found that in the kitchen, in the sink, there was an entire pack of raw, rotting chicken breast just sitting there for who knows how many days. Clothes everywhere, tons of dirty dishes everywhere with half eaten food. It made me gag just stepping in there. And in the same inspection, we go to a different person's unit, and it smells so bad of just cat feces. Cats are a major problem. I'll talk more about that later on, but this lady's unit just reeked. There were half-eaten chicken wings on the counter, again just rotting. We tried turning the lights on, they didn't turn on, so we thought the place was abandoned, but later on I called her. She says she actually does live there, and she was home when we walked in. She was just in her bedroom. I guess her electricity bill just wasn't getting paid, so they cut her power off. I saw her a few days later, and she's just a normal-looking, cute Asian girl who's living in vomit-inducing stench. And not every unit is that bad, but most of them do have just a off smell. Not like a wretched smell, but just a sour, bad smell. Like everybody has tons of dirty clothes all over their house, dirty dishes everywhere, crock pots that they used to make something 8 days ago and they haven't cleaned it, so it's just been sitting out. You walk in and it's just like a sour, sweaty, musty smell. And these people walk into their apartment after a long day at work every day and they just breathe it all in. They just go, it's good to be home. Smells like home. The craziest part isn't even necessarily that they live like that. I mean, my house is cluttered often. I have 2 kids, 2 dogs. But the crazy part is that we always give notice before going into their apartments, a week notice in a lot of cases. And they don't clean up knowing that somebody's coming over. If my house is messy and I know someone's coming over, me and my wife are going to be scrambling to clean up the place to make it presentable. But they don't even care if people come into their house and they look like a slob. The people that I know who are homeowners, they try to make their house presentable. They want to make it more comfortable, habitable. But there's something about apartment dwellers where the longer they live there, eventually it just becomes a den. You go into their apartment, for some reason, people live with their lights off. The lights are always off when I go in there, even if there's people there in the middle of the day. Their place is messy. When I come in, I knock 2 times loudly. Knock, 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 pause. Knock, knock, knock. Open the door. As I'm knocking, I announce myself multiple times. And I always think nobody's home until I get to their bedroom and they're just sitting in their sweatpants with no shirt in front of their computer. Like, what? Get dressed. I know you heard me knocking and yelling, so why wouldn't you come and, greet me? Let me know that you're here. And so many people ask you to come into their apartment. They know you're coming. They ask you to come, and they answer their door in their underwear. This guy was having trouble with his shower. I say, I'll be there in 5 minutes. He answers the door in his underwear. I said, can you please get dressed? And he's like, oh, sorry, I was about to take a shower. Well, yeah, I know, but you stopped that action, and you called me because you wanted me to come up 5 minutes ago. You have plenty of time to get dressed. Anyways, I've seen people who just deteriorate in their apartments, and their apartment just becomes a manifestation of whatever sickness is in their mind. I'll post pictures of this one guy's unit so you can see on the video. This one guy moved into the building like 10 years ago. The maintenance guy said that he moved in with his wife. They seem nice and normal. Well, eventually, the wife ends up leaving him, so now it's just him by the time I get there. And over the years, his mental health just declines. And by that time, I get there and he's just a grade A hoarder. But he was a friendly guy. The kind of guy that's nice. But if you cross paths with him, you know you're going to get wrapped into a conversation you really don't want to partake in. But he was a nice guy, You go into his units. Again, the lights are always off, except one in his dining room. He just lives in a dim darkness. I don't know why they insist on living in darkness. It's so common. It's weird. But there was stuff everywhere, and you can see it on the screen right now. I mean, absolutely disgusting in every room. His bathroom floor was sticky with a layer of old piss. Grime everywhere. The place reeks. He reeks. Bad of BO. When you step in the elevator, you know that he's been there recently because he has a very unique BO smell. And I discovered this issue because we were having mice in the neighboring units, and I was checking out which unit might be the source, and I walk in, and sure enough, this guy, I mean, he lives in a rat nest. And I told him that he has to clean up because mice are getting into the neighbor's place, and he says, "Oh, I don't have any mice." He's like, "I would know if I had mice." And I go, "Okay, well, this place looks like where there would be mice. I mean, your neighbors have a clean apartment." And he's like, "No, I don't have any mice. I haven't heard mice in a couple weeks now." And I said, "Okay, so you heard mice a couple weeks ago, so you probably still have mice." And he just didn't understand the logic. It didn't make sense to him. I was just like, "Here's the deal, man. This is a massive fire hazard. It's a health issue for you and your neighbors. You have to clean up. You have 30 days to clean this place up." Well, a few weeks later, he calls me back in and says, "I cleaned up, check it out." So I go in there. It looks exactly the same. He literally has a mental block that will not allow him to see the condition of his place. And the thing is, you see this guy's car, and his car was completely spotless. He just has this blind spot when it comes to his home. So that's one archetype, the filthy hoarder. Another archetype is the 55, 65-year-old single woman who never got married, never progressed in life, just has a crappy job, and they grow old alone in their apartment. They're always putting in repair work orders more than anybody else. I lived in an apartment for 4 years. I never once put in a work order. But these women just spend time looking for something to complain about. It's like if they were married, they'd be bossing their husband around, but since they're not married, they have to boss around the maintenance guy. And they're always struggling with rent. They ask so much of us, but then they can't even keep up their end of the bargain. And then, of course, they put in a work order, they have to wait more than a couple days. They always threaten to withhold their rent. This type of tenant they always find something to latch onto, and they base their entire life around it. This one lady had these slightly dark spots in the paint on her walls and on the a line on her ceiling, and she decided that there is a leak in the roof and there's mold growing all over her apartment. And she reached out to me, and she's like, she's been coughing lately and having headaches. She never realized why that was happening, but now she realizes that these are symptoms of mold poisoning, and I'm sending you this correspondence in writing to document our conversation about the issue. How are we going to rectify this in a timely manner? If we don't get this resolved soon, I'm going to be sending my rent check to the court so they can withhold, blah, 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 blah. Well, sure enough, I end up just tearing up her whole ceiling where those issues were occurring, and the walls as well in her bedroom, and there was zero moisture, zero mold. Complete waste of time, complete waste of money. Entirely made up and overblown. But I guarantee you, during that time when she thought there was a mold issue, she loved thinking that there was a major problem. It was exciting for her. I bet she would go to work and tell all of her coworkers and all of her customers that walked in that she has a mold issue and she's going to come after us. And what's funny is they renew their lease every single year, every time. They always threaten to not pay their rent, threaten to notify the court. They complain they have to complain so much, but then they never leave. Then there's the pets. We don't allow dogs, but there were so many dogs in our apartments because they were all emotional support animals. And if somebody says that they have an emotional support animal, then we can't question it. We can't charge them any kind of rent, can't charge them any fees. And I think technically they're not as protected as actual service animals, but it's just too much of a minefield to navigate. Anything having to do with people's mental health is such a touchy subject. You have to just comply with their BS under the threat that if you don't, they're going to sue you for discrimination. So one day you'll get an email from a tenant saying that their therapist told them they have to get an emotional support animal, and then the next day they get a brand new puppy. Not potty trained, not crate trained. Their neighbors move in here thinking that there's no dogs allowed in this apartment, and then all of a sudden now there's a dog that's barking all day when their owners leave for work, nonstop. And there's simply nothing we can realistically do about it. These people don't need an emotional support animal. They're just pretending to be mentally ill so they can have an excuse to be an exception to the rule and inconvenience everybody else with impunity. Sorry, you can't be upset that my puppy's barking all day because I'm mentally ill and you can't discriminate against me. We do allow cats, but cats are absolutely disgusting. There's some good cat owners out there, but most of them live in cat filth. You walk into these units, and there's piss stains all over the floor. It reeks of pee. The carpets are all torn up. Most often we have to renovate the entire apartment when somebody moves out after they have a cat. Because people just let their cat pee everywhere in the unit, and they just live in it. This one couple wanted to transfer units. And when that happens, I always go in and check to make sure that the condition of their current unit is good, because I don't want them to destroy a second unit. So I go in there, and I say it reeks of cat pee in here. And she just couldn't smell it. She had no idea that it smells like she washes her floor with cat piss. It was new carpet when they moved in. They were there for 2 years. They never told us that they had cats, so we couldn't charge them pet rent. When I walked in there, I found out that she worked at an animal shelter and she would take the cats home instead of letting them be euthanized. I charged them thousands of dollars when they moved out because they destroyed the carpet. We had to rip up all the floors, paint the subfloor with primer, reinstall new flooring, do the same thing to the walls. Then you have people that never pay rent on time, always on the verge of being evicted every single month. I'll talk more about that in another video. I'm trying to wrap it up here. That's not even half of it, man. You have package thieves, people who argue all the time so their neighbors can hear it, people that have intercourse too loud, smokers, people who blast their music. All these are symptoms of people who are just animals. They're animals. Apartment buildings are just a big complex full of mentally ill, selfish, miserable, poor, angry, gluttonous people. And this is a majority of the population. I mean, these are the common folk. And like I said, I meet all these people and they seem normal when I interact with them on a tour, just like anybody else you might run into out in the world. But once I see their home after they settle in, that's when their true self becomes visible. A lot of times it's easy to be baffled at the opinions or the points of view of some people that you discuss things with out in the world, or see people post online things that you can't even believe that they think that. But I bet if you could see, take an inside look on how they live, the environment that they grew up in, it would make a lot more sense. When you go to work or you ride the train, you're out with the masses, these are the people who I'm describing. This is the average person. When growing up, I always thought of an apartment as something that you lived in when you were 18, just until you could buy a house. Since that's what I always thought of it as, that's what it was for me. I never considered apartment living as a long-term option. And I'm raising my family in a house. Some people have to raise their kids in an apartment building. A lot of these people I'm talking about were raised in apartment buildings. Raised in the environments that I'm describing. Whenever I go to a Target in the city, or I see somebody who's just unreasonable, just like the tenants I have to deal with, like somebody making a fuss about coupons at the checkout line, right? I just can't help but thinking about how this person probably was raised in an apartment building. They're a product of filth and discomfort. Well, my daughter and I were outside putting together garden beds and planting seeds last weekend. These kids were in the apartment building. They were inside, sitting in cat piss and dim lighting with old food rotting around them. After many days, weeks, and years of festering in that environment, eventually they're going to become adults too. And that's scary to think that most people are born of that background, and we have to exist alongside those people every day. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. Tell me about your apartment experiences and some of the animals that you have to live with. Tell me about it in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.